create more traffic
in the first floor.
inside the parking
And
garage.
more potentially hit pedestrians walking.
I see what you're saying. Could you make one 2 ways and the other one way? So that one, I'm asking, I don't know, like that one, so that the apartment people can go in and out, but this one is strictly in or out? It's not both?
It's going to cause a backup on Oakland, I think, if people are trying to turn it into.
Unless you make it no left turns. Or no right
We
turns.
can, I mean, I could take a relook at that, but our basic thought was to keep them both 2-way. So,
That's the biggest complaint we get, so that's what I'm trying to
Well, just
explain.
that entire section is just dangerous. It's just dangerous.
and then another improvement that we're recommending, it's kind of hard to see on this particular area, but right over here, there's this like cutout where it looks like a right turn lane, but it's not a right turn lane. It looks like a parking lane. It's not striped for anything. And unfortunately, that's being used by several different entities, trucks for loading or unloading. The fire department uses that to buy their groceries. That's where they park. I've seen school buses in there and other vehicles. And that just creates a huge sight blockage
Where is
looking
that?
north when you're coming out of that garage.
Can you just explain where that is? I'm sorry. A visual.
My pizza, right in front of it.
No, not in front of my pizza, right, just right here.
Oh, yes, that bump
Yeah.
out, yeah.
Yeah, there, it's like a street wide, like I said, it looks like a right turn lane, but it's not striped that way.
Yeah.
It's not striped for parking or not parking.
Why do you?
The only things that I've ever seen there, and we've talked about this at that same roundtable, was actually like fire trucks, like crushing trucks. And we talked about it, couldn't find anything.
Notes.
I thought that was a bus stop.
At some point, I thought it was
The
too.
bus stop's further north.
Is it for bikes? Because we have a bike pump somewhere
The
around.
bike is just north of, the bubbler is just north of that.
Oh, no, I mean the bike pump.
It's just that, there's just like a bump out.
Why? Where that awning is.
So you're suggesting to fill it in?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, initially, our suggestion is we stripe it out, so it's clearly it's not for parking, and you can add a sign or two as needed. Long term, when improvements need to resurface this area, then you can address the curbing in the long term.
Just to make it clear, the development agreement says we needed a study, and then you were going to talk to the developer, so, I mean, there is potential that the costs are not borne by the village.
All right, then we're over at the crosswalks on Capitol Drive, north of the high school. There's basically 5 crosswalks within a short section, basically west of Capitol, and there's 3 streets opposite the high school. There's 5 crosswalks, one on each side. Well, the first one is 1, and then 2 on each side of the extra street. We just thought that was just way too many crosswalks, too many places for kids to step out, and the drivers, you know, they go past one crosswalk, so they think they're fine, and all of a sudden another kid walks out, and they have to start, stop. We want to reduce that to 3 crosswalks instead of 5
On Capitol?
on Capitol.
Okay, so where are they located on Capitol? Which, by Morris or by?
I don't think I have a picture of that.
No, I'm just, I'm visual, I'm sorry.
No, it's.
Basically, every intersection west of Oakland on Capitol, just north of the high school.
So here's the high school, and basically these 3 intersections right here. They're unsignalized.
Portland,
Okay.
New Hall.
Would you keep it at Morris?
We're not addressing Morris, that's a signal, so.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
So it's
So
just
three
these 3
elements?
unsignalized crossings. They're just 5 crosswalks, and
Do people use them?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so we'd rather have them cross at 3 spots. I mean, personally, I'd rather do it down to 1, like whether it's this one or the middle one, you know, have the kids walk to there. Unfortunately, knowing kids and people, they're incredibly, I call it efficient, which is my code word for lazy. They take the most direct route. So I don't feel we can eliminate, you know, 2 of them and just do it at one street. So we just want to eliminate 2 of them out of the 5. So each street will still have a crosswalk.
No. So I have a question for you though. This came up last year at the board. There is a place where cars can go U-turn, so that, and we kept it that way. We almost tried to stop that. I can't remember which of these intersections it is, maybe, because the reason we pulled it out with the SAFE grant, which was people you can't turn a certain way on Capitol, so they'll have to turn, I mean, on Oakland and Capitol, so they have to turn from Oakland onto Capitol, and then they'll make a shortcut onto Morris, so, just to share this. So if they can't make that U-turn to get back onto Oakland, then they would be continuing to turn onto Morris, and there's a middle school, and there's big resident outcry of needing less cars on Morris. So I'm just wondering, are any of those three that have a crosswalk that U-turn area? I don't remember which one, which street that was.
Newhall.
Is it Newhall?
Come in.
So
And
I
that's
was-
the other thing, that's the crosswalk we want to eliminate.
Yeah, that
Those are
would
the
make sense.
crosswalks on the left, basically the west crosswalks, which cross, each one of those has a left turn lane. So those are the two
That would
we
make
want to
sense.
take out, whether it's because of U-turns or just left turns. Where they're crossing on the east side, there's no turns.
The ones that are doing U-turns are pissed, basically, because they couldn't turn left or right after, and so they're trying to get back. So that makes sense to me. Thank
So
you.
you don't recommend any fences in the median to channel the pedestrian traffic, like at Marquette and East Washington and Madison, where that student was hit?
I'm sorry, what to channel the?
They put fences in the medians to channel the pedestrian traffic.
Well, we can't, these are three existing intersections, so unfortunately, we can't put barriers to channelize them.
Nobody goes on the medians here, do they?
I'd like between the crosswalks to keep them, like, just so you segregate what their
I know what you're
options for
saying.
crossing are.
Yeah.
But at
But we're
Marquette,
at-
people were crossing on the medians. I don't know if that's an issue here, because there's three intersections that are very close, but I get what you're saying. If it was, I would want a recommendation.
Again, trying to help with the rolling stops. We can't totally eliminate them, because we tried as an industry across the country, but we want to basically remove unnecessary signs that encourage people, so when they see a stop sign, they know they really should be stopping. So we've recommended, I don't have the list here of all the stop signs you should consider removing. And that's basically, when I say that, we're going from four-way stops to two-way stops. So we're not eliminating all four of the stop signs at an intersection. We'll keep two on one street or the other, just eliminate two and across, especially when you're driving down a street and there's a couple four-way stops in a row, and you don't necessarily have to stop at each
In
one.
Kensington, for instance, I always stop at every intersection because I have no idea which ones have stop signs. But I just wanted to share for the trustees that are newer and weren't on the board at the time, and for the public that's here, the police chief, and I remember Trustee Maher, mapped out every single stop sign in the village, because that was one of his big, I mean, we used to go to him for stop, he'd be like, well, yeah, to improve safety, he had no guidance. And we had the gut feeling that too many stop signs was actually impeding safety. But thank you for looking at that. Do you know how many you recommended to take out and to make two-way?
It's in the report, I can't remember.
I want to say it's like 7 or 8 intersections, so 14, 15.
That's not that much. And did you give us any guidance for future requests? Because that's the biggest
Yes.
request we get.
Yeah, that's in the report.
Because everyone assumes the stop sign is going to make it safer. It's really hard to say. DOT has given guidance that it does not make it safer if you put them in the wrong spots.
Correct. And then our fourth one was, and I kind of already mentioned this, was to signalize the intersection at Kensington and Oakland. We looked at the traffic, it's a four-way stop now, and in the past, you put up someone's put up the red blinker to reinforce the stop sign, which is really just another step to our traffic signal. We feel the volumes are met. We have to follow, traffic engineers have to follow, and municipalities and state and counties have to follow the manual of uniform traffic control devices. Basically, any paint marking, any signage, we have to observe certain rules to basically to create the uniform part, not only in how they look, but where they're placed. And so one part of the warrants are traffic volumes and pedestrian volumes, so we feel that's going to be met there. So put a traffic signal there. And then the benefit is, as I mentioned, with the future bike boulevard, that helps that bike boulevard, because that's really the only busy crossing that's right there at Kensington. So that becomes a signal to support there. One thing we spoke about, and there were a number of requests for protected bike lanes on Capitol. Obviously, Capitol's the busiest street within the village,
And Oakland or just Capitol?
just on Capitol. On Oakland, it's more difficult because of the commercial and parking environment there and the width. So Capitol, there's more room, but basically, instead of having a travel lane, a bike lane, and then parking, you could switch them in the future and put the bike lane along the curb. Now that's going to modify some of your corners as you do that. This is something that would be done more long-term as part as reconstruction or, of Capitol when they have to repave it from time to time.
Why wouldn't you do that always? Why are you just recommending it there? I'm just wondering, because it's more, if you have both on other streets, why it is protected?
Well, you need a little more room, number one,
Okay.
because you don't, right now, theoretically, there's a danger of being doored,
Yeah.
the bike lane, and there's a danger of traffic.
Mhm.
You still have the issue of dooring potential, so what you try to do is make it that parking lane wider and actually put 2 or 3 feet of striping between the bike lane and the parking to prevent that part, and let the pedestrian get out, or let someone get out of the car without endangering the
I
bike.
love that.
So that's
So
a little more
does-
intensive.
You recommended that street design, what is it called? The street? They-
Complete street, that's
They
a,
use that on Wilson. We had the opportunity to do, why did we not do that on Wilson when we reconstructed it? On the west side, on the east side of Wilson, wherever we put the bike lane. I wonder. Because does Complete Streets recommend that?
yeah, no, I understand
Okay.
that. The simple answer is I don't know, but, because I
But it
was
would
involved with
recommend
that. But,
That program would recommend that, is all I'm asking if there's with.
well, Complete Streets wants you to accommodate all modes of transportation,
Right.
including bikes. So it doesn't necessarily, says it has to be a protected bike lane. But
Right.
put in a bike lane. How it gets accommodated, there's obviously several choices.
Steve, a protected bike lane is quite a bit more capital intensive too, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to just a typical bike lane. That could have been.
Because of the extra feet?
Yes.
So-
Yeah, some municipalities do bollards. There's more movement that's
We
required.
just didn't even consider it, it just didn't
Yes.
come to our radar.
Street.
Thanks for sharing that.
But one short thing you can do just to make the bike lane more visible is to paint the whole thing green. That's been accepted. That's actually, it's a, what do they call it, interim approval in the manual uniform traffic control devices. It's just a step before it gets incorporated in the manual. but
Is
you're
it
allowed.
significantly more expensive?
Green paint is more expensive, yes. And then some communities get around that by doing it at the side streets, basically not the whole lane for the block, but doing it at the front and the back, or as you're approaching the side street. So, because then as cars come off the side street, they turn on, they're not going to, it gives them more visibility not to turn into the bike lane by accident. We have a number of other recommendations the report goes through. I'm not going to really go through these. I do have a couple more. I'm going to touch on a couple of these.
Loading zones, please.
We talked about Metro Market. Morris Menlo cut through traffic. Without a doubt. There was a study done a couple of years ago looking at the traffic volumes. It's obvious to most casual observers there's cut through traffic on Morris Menlo. We're not saying there's not. It's measured at about 5,600 cars a day going from, basically it's the shortcut. Instead of taking Capitol to Oakland, you're taking it around to get down to UW-Madison, or I'm sorry, not UW-Milwaukee. It's probably one of the prevailing streams as far as the cut through goes.
And their buses.
What's that?
And their vans go down there. We also have our garbage trucks from Whitefish Bay going down.
Right, well, Public Works is located off there, and there's some other things, but unfortunately, okay, so one thing we did consider was, let's say we block it off and cul-de-sac it so there's no cut through at all, other than the residents. That basically forces all that 5,000 traffic in front of, next to the high school, down Capitol, turning right or left to go south
Well, right
on
now it's
Oakland,
private.
and that's,
Well, but right now it's in front of the middle school.
right. But, so it's not desirable to make that major shift in traffic patterns. However, what the key is, we want to make them a safer road for the residents, as well as for the drivers and for the school children. by trying to control speeding. You know, it's a 25-mile-an-hour limit, less when the school's in session and for the section of the school. The survey a couple years ago showed people, the 85 percentile driving 28, 29 miles an hour. So there's definitely speeding, even though it may, you know, I know sometimes the police usually wait till 30. That's kind of unofficial, but they're doing that. So we're talking about constructing bump outs at some of the cross streets to make the pedestrian crossings better. It makes the streets narrower and helps slow down traffic. We went back and forth on this and kind of changed our minds. Public Works is not exactly thrilled with the idea of speed bumps, or not speed bumps, speed humps or speed tables. So, because obviously that impacts their plowing.
Does it? Because they have those in other places in the nation.
Yeah, I know.
What's your opinion as a traffic person? I really would like to know, because it's all that.
Well, it's done other places, so.
Does it impact, does it make more maintenance for the trucks, or?
Well, if they actually hit it, yes. I mean, it's a training thing, it's a combination thing, it takes some time. So before we make those things permanent, we basically suggest let's do a trial. We can get these temporary ones that you can bolt to the road, do some after survey, see how that's helping, and then you can eventually make those permanent. You can pull those up before snow starts, because obviously with the streets and the snow, people tend to drive slower. Not always, but tend to. So
It just means I have to pay attention.
I
more
understand.
to what they're
I just,
doing.
that's why I asked it, that's why I'm asking. But is the table, is that different than a hump? Is there a difference in grade, or is there for our staff purposes of discussions, does it make it easier to not damage a plow? You know, like, is there a
as
difference?
far as that goes, there's no difference between the two. I mean, speed hump is essentially just a curve the whole way, where speed table goes up, flat, and then down.
So that's the same, okay.
And then the temporary ones tend to be the flat ones.
Okay, so in Estabrook Park, they have temporary, but they're like, you know, you hit them and bang.
Yeah, that,
So you're
see, we
talking
don't,
more like a Cambridge Boulevard ones that are like, you just need to slow down and go over
Right.
them.
Or else
we
you
call,
have to-
we think, those sound more like speed, those are like speed, what we call speed bumps, which are the more traditional, ancient,
Yeah,
strip of 4 inches of asphalt only about that wide, and like you said, you hit it and you get a big bump. They cause all kinds of other problems. If you're in a bike and you hit those, you can fall over. Tripping hazard, also traps water, so we never do speed bumps anymore. It's either humps or speed tables. Or speed cushions, that's another thing. And one of the other recommendations is at the curve of Morris Monroe, the entrance to the park, is you have a lot of asphalt there. We're talking about getting rid of this. And again, this could be more of a long term, but make this the new curb line. We would have to extend this person's driveway and that person's. This is the extension from the existing sidewalk to the corner. And then get rid of this sidewalk, crosswalk, and put one here and here. It's better from site
Is
visibility.
that a cut through? Is that another road right there?
This, right, yeah.
So you're saying just close, okay.
But it just goes into the park, so it's not necessarily a high volume thing,
Okay.
but it makes, you know, the interesting thing, this is on a curve. Obviously, there's a part through that pedestrian attracted, and, you know, ideally we don't put crosswalks on curves. This is a little different, and we feel if we make these changes, this will make it a much better situation than it is. And these are existing stop signs that would remain.
Question, is that going into the parking lot?
Yeah, well, there's a few homes, like right south of here, and then it's into the parking lot.
Okay, so it's not the entrance to the parking lot?
Yeah,
Darn
no,
it.
it is.
Show me right
Well,
on.
It's the street that goes to the.
It's the street that goes to the entrance, but it's not like it's right off that area?
Correct.
Because we have a parking utility and we have so many in there.
No.
Won't apply.
Again, along the pedestrian safety, in terms of We've heard this a number of times, crossing Lake Drive, the only really protected pedestrian crossing point is at Capitol, where they have the traffic signal. That, I was out here during the summer when that beach was real busy, that's almost, I couldn't almost make a right turn, just waiting for, just right around dinner time, everyone's going home, and it's like, okay, as soon as they call cross, the lake turns red again. But anyhow, so we're recommending taking these two crosswalks, one in Jarvis and the one by Menlo, which is out south of Atwater. And eventually, we can put some flashing beacons here, the rectangular, rapid flashing rectangular beacons. And then long term, you can see the white line here and the white line here. This is an ideal spot for a bump out also, to make the crossing distance shorter.
So taking away parking.
Well, not really, because A, you can't park at a crosswalk.
Okay.
You shouldn't be parked right on top of it anyhow, because if you're traveling northbound, you don't want a car right here, and then this person walks right out in front of that car.
Okay.
Now, they'll have the beacon too to help them warn drivers. Same thing here, you're on the corner, so you'll lose some frontage, but again, you don't want people parking that close to it, so.
True.
They can now, as it is.
They probably do.
And they probably, yes, that's what I was saying, they probably do. So the bump outs can probably wait till, again, there's always a timing issue.
2023.
Wait till reconstruction. And
2025.
Would you recommend those beacons have a button activation?
absolutely. They all should. Yeah.
You're not eliminating crosswalks. There's a few crosswalks. You're just picking this one.
We're taking them to the next level. Right now, they're just crosswalks.
Are they laddered yet? Are they like that? I can't remember.
Yes,
They
and
are.
this is the picture, yeah.
Okay.
So both of them, and there's a third one by Menlo, but we didn't recommend that one just because it was closer to the Menlo one, so we don't want to put these all over the place either.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay.
So, because that one's, I think, to the north, so they could either walk to Atwater or walk down the Menlo if they want to do it protected. And just kind of summarize a number of our recommendations. Again, consistency, follow the manual uniform traffic control devices. One of the examples we mentioned in the report is your crosswalks. We got all kinds of different crosswalk styles in the village. We're not recommending you take out the pavers, except for one location. But the other ones, you should paint them all consistently the same. And those are what we call the imperial or continental, which are the bars, like we just
Like
saw.
a ladder? We call them ladder crosswalks?
Well, being a picky traffic engineer, a ladder would then also have a white
Oh, I
stripe.
see.
So you can do it if you want. It's not necessary. We like the wide ones because as you're driving down, try to see a 2 or 3, 4 inch wide stripe is harder than trying to see a 6 foot wide
Yeah.
stripe, so.
What about on concrete? So Capitol Drive is concrete, and so we have to use different paint. Does that cause a problem?
No. I mean, crosswalks are done on concrete.
Just using different
Oh,
paint?
we're timed out.
Fuck yes. Interesting, so if we decide this year in budget, we might do find something for Capitol Drive.
Yeah. A couple things we mentioned, there's some things that came up in the town hall about people not behaving correctly in terms of adults riding their bikes on sidewalks, things like that. There's really not an engineering answer to that, but as part of any public campaign or any distribution of material, things like that come public outreach to remind people that, hey, if you're an adult, for example, ride on the street, not on
We do
the
that.
sidewalks and
Question
things
for
like
you
that.
about Oakland and bike lanes, because I don't know if you addressed it, but we have bike lanes, they're smaller because of the width of the road, and they're right in the middle of the bike lane is cracked. So until we fix the road, is there any recommendation for that?
I'm sorry, what kind of crack?
A deep fissure crack? It's a failure of the.
Oh, failure of the concrete?
Yeah.
There's different ways to address that.
I'm just wondering if you had any recommendation about bike lanes on Oakland? Keep the same.
I'm sorry, I lost.
Oh, it's okay. There was no address of bike lanes on Oakland. You're just saying maintain the same.
Yes,
Okay,
maintain
thank
those,
you.
yeah. And then kind of the way to handle requests, this is the simple, most communities, public works or the engineering department, which,
It's the same.
you know, public works should handle all these requests. And we kind of split it up into 3 requests. There's the, what I call the traffic control or simple request. So someone asks for a stop sign, whether they ask you as a trustee or talk to a police officer or customer service, they would then can submit that request down to Public Works. They document it, that there's this request, and they can investigate it and come up with an answer. And then,
So currently, the police department does parking requests, limitations of parking, and he also handles stop signs. And you're saying switch that, because of the safety, I guess, in the history, might be no more, just for
well,
safety.
yeah, because first of all, it ends up Public Works installs them or takes them out, depending what the
Okay.
answer is. I'm not saying the police department, and then Public Works would then reach out to the appropriate departments to weigh in on. For example, the police department, is there a crash history? Is there a speeding history? Do you write a lot of tickets there to handle that? It can go to planning, because part might have a development going down the street that might affect the decision one way or the other. If it's a budget issue, go to the finance department, that's the kind of the center of where this stuff happens, and then brings in people like that. Obviously, there's bigger projects like the Wilson Drive, like that Public Works is obviously involved, but there's also a public process. Now, sometimes you as a village run that, sometimes the state runs it, however it works. And then last but not least, there's developer-based requests. So a developer goes to BART, I got this plan, it involves impacting the street system or pedestrian system. He would then turn to Public Works and say, okay, here's what they're thinking, what do you think about it as far as?
Special events that affect streets, Public Works would be the lead.
Yeah, they would be involved plus with the police. That one, we didn't address it specifically, depending on what kind of special event it is, probably it's a combination of Public Works and Police Department. In my community, we have several of those special events, and I know with my village, it's actually a joint effort. Public Works comes out and brings up the barriers and the parking signs, it does all that, and then police, along with some volunteers, does the traffic control.
And lastly, loading zones. That me and the village manager really wanted to know what you think, because we get a lot of requests in the business district, more so than we did, because it's more vibrant now, and
Yeah.
there's no guidance for her.
Right, well, we basically recommended on a as requested basis, no more than 1 per block, and that's for both sides.
That's a lot.
Well, I mean, I'm saying for 1 block, if there's 1 loading zone, whether it's one side or the other.
Well, our blocks are pretty short. That's
Yeah,
what-
well,
that's what my comment
there's
is.
some blocks that may be an exception to that.
That
That's
would be a
our,
lot.
and then they don't have to be 24/7 loading zones. You have to, depending on the business they're requesting them, you might have to limit their deliveries to, like, say, depending on where your area is. If it's a very busy morning area, you might, or, limit it to 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. and then, or you can do it till noon.
That concerns me just a tad, as I'm sharing with my peers, because Oakland Avenue is, the businesses want their parking in front of their, and so when we get a request for a loading zone, the adjacent small businesses lose that one spot where someone comes in, like, I'm going to give an example, like a coin shop, where that's the one spot people come in and out of, and if you put a loading zone there because of 1 per block, he's going to lose, like, the fitness, the gym, Curves lost 50% of their customers in a year. So that, to me, as a small business, 1 per block on Oakland Capitol, maybe, but I don't know.
There's also going to be time restrictions too, so not parking it.
So, and that's the kind of the key is time. First of all, who wants to use
The
it?
gym might be an exception because they have huge early
Right.
business, but a lot of times you'll see loading zone until 7 a.m. or loading zone until 10 a.m., sometimes noon.
No,
So there
not
could
us.
be, there could be a determination made there, but there would be some challenges definitely around the gym, sure.
And just like a lot of these recommendations, there's going to be specific areas that are, a lot different or affected differently. But as far as the recommendations that we had, we were focused on the whole village. So, certain areas are going to be, like Andrew said, these hot spots that are going to need a little bit more.
That's where we get the loading requests, is Oakland Capitol, really.
Yeah.
or anybody has a concern about that. And is a loading zone better than having the trucks, the big trucks stop on Middle Street? Because I mean, that's a big loading zone for beer trucks. We have a liquor store, we have bars that have, coming in with their rolling rock trucks. And is it better to have them pull over and lose that parking, or what would be your recommendation? Because right now
Well, essentially, you have basically 2-lane streets, so if the truck blocks the lane, it's blocking traffic.
So it's better to have one.
Yes, they have a place to pull off.
Oh, God, our business. Okay. Yes, yes, sorry.
Well, I was part of the walk audit this past week, and I spent an hour on Oakland Avenue as support for some elderly as part of it. And in that hour, from 2 to 3 p.m., there wasn't a single minute in front of Camp Bar in that hour that
They have a loading zone.
northbound lane was not obstructed by a truck.
And they have a loading zone.
And it was completely obstructed for an entire hour and by 3 separate trucks.
And that's the problem, because it's just because,
Well, and I think it's gonna be
The
a
cars
comprehensive.
would have to go into the
other lane.
the southbound lane.
So
And
then you get to
and then
loading
they
zones on
would
side
get
streets.
around and,
The residents hate that.
Yeah,
Or
well,
you
I
could do a
think it's
loading zone on
gonna
the side
be
street,
like
but the
a-
residents go crazy, yeah, so.
Like a comprehensive approach. It's gonna be the business owners, the village, it's not, enforcement. It's gonna be a lot of people coming together to kind of create these. It's not just gonna be put up a sign and there it is. So it's gonna be a lot of, Steve mentioned it, education, kind of educating,
And the business owner really needs to work with the village because they're asking for something, but you also want to provide for others in terms of the parking, so restrictions help deal with that.
Yeah, it just comes to us and then we have to decide. It gets hard. Yes, Bart.
I do have one question because I haven't seen the revised report that indicates the request from Public Works or village staff. So I came from a community where we would allow resident requests, but there was a minimum, signature for it. So like, I want to do this in my neighborhood, but I needed to get 50% of my block to agree that it was worth reviewing. Because otherwise you have one resident asking for the same thing over and over and over again. And so in our case, we had a standard that said, for this type of request, you had to have, X signatures or whatnot before we would even consider doing it, because the assumption was that we were doing the minimum that we would do anyways. And this was an extra request.
For just loading zones or were there?
Well, for anything.
For anything, stop signs?
Right, stop sign or a painted curb, for example. So, and then if you were requesting something that was not normal,
Or
that we
change
would
to
not cover
north side
within
of the
our,
street, parking.
typical budget costs, we don't paint curbs. But if your neighborhood petitioned for it and either assessed yourselves for it or somehow paid that matching cost, then we would consider doing it, but as a standard, we did not do things like that. But because we had so many requests of it, they made a program, it wasn't highly utilized because no one would pay for themselves, but it gave the opportunity,
That's excellent.
just to say that. And so when we have these requests where I want typical alley parking is like 4 feet from the alley, and they want 10 feet from the alley, they want a sign, they want 50. We would have said, okay, if you want to request it, you must get X percentage of people to do it. We'll identify the cost, and you must somehow find a way to cover that. if
Or
that's the
half, or
case.
whatever we decide.
Right, so, like I said, I have not seen that full
That's great.
section or something, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on comments of
And the
that
only,
nature.
let me just give you, but for the new trustees, we used to have a budget for striping of like 20,000 and we never used it all. And now it's like double. That's how much striping since I've been here, we have incurred based on resident requests.
Because that's where we're coming from, is that we get individual requests for things like that we just cannot, and I'm speaking, I guess, for the board, legitimately handle budgetary wise, and so
Or know how to make the decision, one over the other. It's like,
And so that's kind of where my interest in this particular resident request policy would come in. Because if we thought we could do it with our current budget, I think we would be doing it. But these are extra requests that we physically and monetarily can't handle.
because there's a lot of them. I mean, and we're a small village. We're a very active village.
Because yeah, I'd be concerned that we leave this report saying like, okay, resident can request DPW to do that, and then we have individual people contacting DPW all the time, for things like that, minimum standards. So this is my comment, I suppose you can think about it.
That's an excellent comment.
Now, in terms of traffic control, I've never seen that in terms of like stop sign requests or
You haven't seen our village yet.
No, I'm just saying in terms of someone makes a request and they need to get X number of signatures. Because stop signs really, it's not, or I've seen that for parking all the time at the particular street, which I'm
How
not.
do residents request a stop sign then?
No. They just make a request.
They just make a request, okay.
Right. Like, when I at one point worked for a city traffic department, and I was a little guy on the totem pole, so they basically gave me the question, I went out and did whatever needed to be done, anything from bushes, blocking sight distance, to looking at stop signs, looking at sight distance, things like that, and we respond back to the,
Well, we have residents that are very active, so when one person, this makes sense, Bart, because when one person wants a stop sign, and we evaluate, police chief comes in and says, yeah, I'll make it safer, whatever, it's gonna, slower cars. We put it up, 3 other residents are complaining because they didn't want the stop sign there. I've had that twice. And so, in our village, it might make sense. We do petitions for when people want to restrict their parking, their daytime parking, by permit, which I need to ask you before you leave. But we do petitions. Kensington gave us a petition for, what was it for when that kid got hit?
They wanted restricted parking on one side.
On one side. So those I see, but not stop signs or loading zones. And it's
stop sign,
voluntary.
and again, stop signs are generally controlled by the they're either warranted or they're not.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So,
Oh, yeah,
it should be that black and white.
Comes to the board.
And they're not supposed to be used for speed control too, or they're not allowed to be used for speed control.
It's terrible.
I guess I'm a little confused, because this is not a plan, this is an analysis. A technical analysis with some technical recommendations. So it's not a plan, and I think,
So we did suggest in the revised draft
Kind of.
a way to handle
Implement.
these requests. Not necessarily the level
The
of
village
detail
Right,
of
no,
petitions, but
I'm saying over, the whole document, is you've made suggestions. My concern is it gets labeled as a plan and accepted. It assumes we're taking your recommendations and accepting your recommendations. And I don't think that's where, I think your analysis is
None of us do,
being
right?
received.
We've all said that. We said that at the beginning.
Yeah, and that's why
This
it's
is,
it's an analysis.
yeah, and recommendations, and
I would
then we will
accept
decide.
this might be
which
not-
one.
Exactly, the implementation is gonna be on the village.
Correct,
Yeah, except it's going to be the receipt.
correct, and that's why we need to
We're
say
giving
it.
information and documentation, so you can review it, look at it.
Yes.
And then the village is gonna be more the implementation.
Right, we may
side.
pick one, we may pick none. but-
Exactly.
Oh, thank you. I have the last question because this is very important, and it comes up when I was in public safety for 3 years or 2 years. The daytime residential restrictions around the university. In Milwaukee, when I worked there, that's when they developed it. It took them about 10, 12 years to get that done. And then I assume Shorewood followed the same university. But it's a very effective way because there's a lot of students that commute. And the residents could never park. So, but in our situation, we drew that boundary and we stopped it at Capitol. And there was a reason. And I talked to the last village manager when he had all the history. And the reason that he gave me was that Capitol's a business district. And you don't really want to restrict daytime parking in your business district. And then, so if you cross it, because there are a few businesses on the other side of Capitol, they did some modifications to make sure that those employees have. Anyways, we're getting requests now, and we've approved 2. And I vehemently said we need some direction on this for our ordinance. Milwaukee is a hard boundary, but it comes to the board and they can petition, any street in the village can petition, which are mostly right there on the other side of Capitol, to have their daytime parking restricted, exactly the same as the RCA. What are your thoughts? I'll tell you mine. I can't stand that. I want a hard boundary, but I would like to hear from the experts.
Yeah, I would say generally it's more, hard boundary as part of a municipality or municipality-wide. It's pretty rare that you see these little spot checks or little pieces. That's kind of what it looks like right now. We drew a map
Yeah,
of
we
it
have
at
2
one of the presentations.
that we just
And then there's
put
some
up.
around the schools too, of course, east or west on the.
Different.
Different reasons, right, but.
The university.
Yeah, generally it's more all or nothing. It's not as.
It's hard to enforce, and my concern always was our Oakland Avenue. It was going to start spreading there because we have Jarvis, that wants to be one way. And if they get a hold of the fact that they can do this by petition, and we have to count cars. Police take 7 days to count cars and to make sure that they're not 60% occupied during the day at these times. I mean, it's ridiculous, but they can get it. And I'm just like, we're going to kill our business district if we start. I mean, it's village-wide, you can do that. So,
Well, and I think that keep referring to our, planning goals, but to allow that adds more to staff time to go in and do that. I mean,
and
so,
where do the businesses park? I mean, if you're going to Noah's Ark, where are you going to park
right.
to bring your pet? I mean, if every street that starts getting congested, which is it's happening around Oakland now because we have a successful business district,
Right.
that is my fear.
Yeah.
We're trying to be more direct with our language about putting some sort of cap on that, or.
If that's what you're recommending,
Right.
I'm not trying to dissuade you, I'm just telling you the issue.
Mhm.
Yeah.
With a 2-hour parking, there is a 2-hour parking in the congested
Right.
area.
Yeah.
You're just trying to eliminate people parking all day employing
Right, especially those
right
students.
around the,
Exactly.
No, the two that were petitioned were specifically because they watched people get out of their car and put a bike, and it was professors going to the university,
Right.
and I'm like,
And we
Just
heard-
more cap.
You're trying to
we've
limit
heard
that, but
at the
that's why I'm
town
asking them.
meetings, yeah.
but it can be for any reason, it can be that customers are parking and it's not residents, on Jarvis, and, or on Wood, and then do.
It's 2-hour
It's the
parking.
same ordinance that you were allowed to petition for that. And if you meet these criteria as the board, it should approve it. And that, it could kill a business district if people get a hold of that. That's my feeling.
Okay.
But thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you, that was excellent. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for it. And what's the next step, Bart? For,
So I'll be providing a revised, or a memo for the board meeting on Monday night, so there'll be a discussion of new business in terms of the next step and these loose ends and cleaning them up, and then, like I said, the implementation charts that Becky and I drafted will be part of that, so that you can get an initial review of that, help guide your thoughts on where staff should be spending, and bring things back to you as we, obviously we can't do all at once. And
so you're just giving us your recommendations of
It's
what?
just our, observation and recommendation of what we see with them and how we think we should be tackling it, and we want to confirm that with you, so we're spending our time appropriately.
And what about consultants? So I know they've made a few notes, what's the next step for that? Okay.
So I have not, so my expectation is they're going to give me a revised draft by the end of the day tomorrow, is what I understand, because there were a few things that I said that were still missing. The conversation tonight might have helped clarify some other things that you guys feel perhaps are missing, so they're going to give us a revised draft at that point. I'll, read it again, make sure I have it, and then we'll bring it back to the board for, it sounds like you wanted the term received rather than accepted, so when that document is updated with all that information, we'll bring it back likely on the 17th, because I don't think we'll have time to do it on Monday, obviously, so.
Okay, sure. All right.
So that's my expectation of the plan. Obviously, things, can shift and change, but I will be doing a memo tomorrow morning, and we'll update the packet for that discussion on
And this is the
Monday night.
last time we'll see the consultants, right?
I would expect that to.
Okay, and then I want to tell you thank you. It was a great job, and I really appreciate it. I did 4 years for the study. I'm so excited about it, so
Yeah.
thank you so much. You did a great job.
No, I mean, thank you for your time.
Yep, and if you have any follow-up based on our questions, you'll put that in the report, right? Like, okay, great.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
so we have a motion to adjourn.
I moved to so.
Do we have another one?
Yeah.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Carpenter.
Aye, okay. Who's that? Sorry. She's so
Oh my God, we got time.